Great. Chris Minns here. Good morning. It's nice to be with you all on what is still a sad morning up here in the Hunter Valley, as I'm joined this morning with the Mayor of Cessnock, Jay Savale, the Mayor of Singleton, Sue Moore, local members of Parliament, Dave Lazell and Clayton Barr, as well as Acting Assistant Commissioner Tracy Chapman and Jared McMillan from Singleton Sunrise Rotary, to talk a little bit about the emergency response, the effect on the local community, and how members of the community can do their part if they'd like to make a donation after this traumatic event in the life and community of this wonderful town. A few things. First of all, there's been an outpouring of grief, not just across this region or the state, but the entire country as a result of that traumatic and terrible accident on Sunday night in Greta. And as a result of that, we've seen this community come together in unprecedented ways to lean on one another in a very difficult set of circumstances. The impact of that grief has meant, in many cases, both mayors will report to you today that people have offered their own homes, their own accommodations, their hotels, their Airbnb to anyone who's visiting this community to be with loved ones or to deal with the grief of losing somebody in their family as a result of this road accident. I think it's indicative of how wonderful this local community is and how close-knit they are, and when somebody's in trouble, people drop everything at the drop of a hat to ensure that the community in Cessnock and Singleton is there to represent the local community. I think that it's wonderful to hear stories over the last 24 hours at both the community centres that grief counsellors who are off duty have offered their time and expertise to those that may have been affected by this terrible, terrible tragedy. And I think that's an example of the kind of people that you're dealing with here. It's often said in regional accidents that more often than not, the emergency responders will know somebody who is in that accident. And when there is a traumatic road accident, people in the community will know personally those that have been affected. Now, that's obviously devastating for a community like Singleton. On the flip side of that, it means that when you do have a devastation like this, you can lean on one another because you all know each other by name. And that's what we're really counting on in the Singleton community over the next few weeks. And I know Mayor Sue Moore will say more about that, the community response, the grief the community is going through, and how we'll all need to be there for them in the next few weeks and months. A couple of points that are really important to make. There has been, as I said earlier, an outpouring of grief and community response to this devastation. Many people are looking for ways of donating money financially to this appeal, and so the New South Wales government has partnered with Rotary Australia so that people can donate if they wish to as a result of this accident. And the place you should go to donate is www.rawcs.org.au, or the New South Wales government webpage, which is nsw.gov.au, where you can make a donation to Rotary. Now, Rotary is trusted, they're experienced when it comes to collecting donations at this scale, and of course they'll make sure that that money is donated in a timely way to the communities that have been affected, and in particular to the families that have been affected over the coming months. We've kicked off the first donation with the Premier's discretionary fund of $100,000. Now, I need to point out that's taxpayer funds, and I'm sure that everybody that lives in New South Wales would expect that the first donation would come from taxpayer dollars to Rotary Australia so that they can distribute those funds. So once again, if you'd like to make a contribution, it's to the New South Wales government website, nsw.gov.au, or www.rawcs.org.au, and I'm sure media representatives will be able to communicate that to their listeners and viewers and readers over the coming days. Look, in terms of those that are still in hospitals in New South Wales, we have 9 patients in a stable condition at John Hunter Hospital, 2 in a stable condition at Singleton Hospital, and 2 in Sydney at RPA who are in a stable condition. Our thoughts are with them over the coming weeks as they mend their injuries, and we're there for that community. And look, this is going to be a difficult period for this community in the Hunter Valley over the next few weeks and months, and as the immediate glare begins to fade away, we all need to be there for this community, because it will take many people a long time to get over what is clearly an unimaginable tragedy for so many families and such a large community. I'm going to hand over now to the Mayor of Cessnock, Jay Savale, to say a few words. Jay.
Thank you, Premier, and thank you for your ongoing support of our community and by starting off with such a significant donation to the families and victims involved on behalf of the people for New South Wales. We really appreciate that. Our community is wanting to come together and support people and victims of this tragedy, and they have been wanting a centralised donation point, so I'm really thankful for Rotary Australia for partnering with the government to make this available so people know that when they do donate that the money goes to these victims and exactly where they expect it to go. So that's fantastic. We are a very close-knit community. We've had so many offers locally of support, people dropping into our drop-in centres, bringing in cakes and biscuits, people offering accommodation for families that need it, that are still in hospital. So we want to come together and support it. I encourage everyone that is able to from around the country to support this cause. There's many people that travel to our area to visit our world-class tourism destination that have probably travelled on these same roads, travelled through bus transport, that I'm sure have been sending their love, and if they're able to, they could please send money to support the victims involved. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
Thanks, Premier, for being here today. Chris, sorry for disrespect calling you Chris,
No,
but
please don't.
your level of reaching out to us has been phenomenal, and I sincerely thank you, and I know the community thanks you for your presence here today and your generous donation to the Rotary Fund. The Rotary Fund, of course, will be a secure avenue of people giving if they can. Our community continues to heal. It's going to be a very long healing process, day by day, step by step. The drop-in centres are still available, options there for people to see, but also other options to access private that I've been emailed details of that, so the Red Cross will have those details if you want to access private help and not be walking through these doors. I know some people have been concerned about that. The other thing I'd like to say is thank you, Jay, for being a support to me. Jay and I work very well across Hunter Wine and Tourism together, the joint organisation of councils, and just as being a neighbouring council. Our communities don't see local government boundary lines, they just see a community. So thank you, Jay, for being support to me, and thank you again, Chris, for being here. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. There's Tracy here. Sorry. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just by way of a policing update, we provided you information yesterday with respect to the charges that were laid, and I won't provide any further comment on that issue. It would be inappropriate. That matter is now before the courts. Needless to say, our investigators and police involved in this matter will continue to work toward compiling that brief and putting the information before the court. In terms of our identification processes, that does continue, and we are getting closer to that formal identification process, but at this stage we are still yet to formally identify those victims. In terms of the road was reopened last night, and a tremendous effort from Transport New South Wales and police working together to now provide a safe passage for people who may wish to lay flowers and take a moment out of their day to think about the people who have lost their lives. But not only to those people, but for the people who now have to rebuild their lives and work their way through that grief. This opportunity to take a moment out of your day, I think, is something that is needed by the community. So thank you to Transport New South Wales for their assistance with that. From my perspective, coming from Hunter Valley as my substantive command, I've worked here for a number of years, and I know that the Singleton community will rally together and pull through this. They have done this time and time again in terms of the various emergencies they've faced, and I know it will be a long and arduous process for them, but my thoughts are with the community, the families, and everyone else who is impacted by this. Finally, I'd like to thank all the first responders, in particular my police, and the work that they have done over the last few days has been tremendous. But obviously on the night and then subsequent to that, the work from all the first responders, Ambulance New South Wales, Fire and Rescue New South Wales and the RFS really demonstrates the way that our resources pull together and get the job done when that's what's required. So thank you to those as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. And I'm going to ask Jared McMillan from Rotary Singleton Sunrise to say a few words. Jared, if you're available. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Premier. On behalf of Rotary, I personally want to thank you, Premier, for kick-starting this fundraising activity to help the victims, the families of this horrific crash. Rotary's heart goes out to all those who are affected, and it's not only the people in our local communities, but there were people attending this wedding from interstate, and our heart and prayers go out to them as well, because they must be hurting as well. The money that the government has put in to kickstart this fund, $100,000, we really appreciate it. I was asked this morning how soon was the money going to be distributed, but with Rotary's name, the governance issues have got to be all in line, and we won't be sitting on this money. It will be distributed, but there'll be certain guidelines and set up so that we can help as many people as we can. And as we talk, there was two young children who have lost their parents. Now, they're going to need ongoing support. There are just so many people hurting in our community, but we're resilient here in the Hunter Valley. We're resilient in Australia, and I've been getting calls from interstate as well. People really want to get behind us, and that's what we do. That's what we do in Australia. We help the battler, we help those who are down, and we try and give them a hand up and support them the best we can. So thank you for being here, but Premier, thank you very much for kickstarting this fund. Thank you. Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you.
And I think we're all happy to take questions.
Premier, are you aware of the local Singleton Roosters fundraiser they kicked off yesterday, which has already raised in excess of $100,000?
Yeah, I am, and I want to pay tribute to the Singleton Roosters. They've done a GoFundMe page that's already raised over $100,000. They've capped that donation. They're telling supporters to go to the New South Wales Government website or Rotary Australia to make further donations. But it's an example of community spirit that a football club could set up that page in short order and distribute those funds to people who are really hurting.
Do you expect that money could be spent on general mention?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to leave it up to Rotary and their governance processes to distribute the funds, but we anticipate that the money will be used for funeral expenses for those that have passed, as well as ongoing support for, in particular, those two children who are left without parents as a result of this terrible, terrible tragedy.
Are there any plans for a public memorial service?
We need to speak to civic leaders, both Sue and Jay, about next steps for that, but I imagine it will be very important for the community to come together to grieve, to show their resilience and to get back up on their feet. I mean, what we've seen from the civic leadership in the Hunter Valley over the last couple of days is that the long road to getting back on our feet has begun, but it's going to take a long time.
How can people access the funding?
That's a good question. We'll be dealing with Rotary and as well as Rotary grief counsellors, New South Wales Police, and those family support officers from Police and New South Wales Health to ensure that the victims of this accident know where they can access funds. And as Jared said, it will be distributed as soon as we can get the money out the door.
Premier, would some of this money be spent on a permanent memorial, or is that something the government would consider in the future?
We'd consider that, but I don't have an announcement in relation to that right now. The point of this media conference is to let people know that if you want a appreciable and demonstrable way of helping in this terrible, terrible tragedy, then go to Rotary or the New South Wales Government website and make a much appreciated donation to this wonderful community.
What about stricter seatbelt laws? Is that something that you guys would do?
Look, a couple of things in relation to that. Firstly, we will wait for the police investigation to be completed. They'll submit that report to the government, and of course we'll act on the recommendations that they make. In addition to that, there'll be a coronial inquiry, no doubt, into this accident, and those recommendations will be submitted to government as well. That will take a bit of time, so I am looking and we'll be in constant contact with New South Wales Police about next stages. If there's decision points that we need to make in the short run to keep people safe, particularly on regional roads, then we'll do that. I did want to make it very clear, however, and this is not in relation to the specific case because I'm not going to comment about it, but if I'm asked directly, if there are seatbelts on coaches and buses in New South Wales, you're legally required to wear them, and that's an important message to get out to the people of this state.
Obviously this is a tragedy that a lot of people are talking about, a lot of people are hearing about who may or may not be directly involved here in Singleton and Cessnock. I guess what would you have to say to anybody in New South Wales, across the country, who is seeing this story everywhere and really feeling the effects of it?
Look, I'd say a couple of things. Firstly, Australians are big-hearted, generous people, and I'm not surprised in the slightest that having woken up on Monday morning to this devastation, they wanted to think about ways to help out. And to hear stories from the local mayors about people opening their houses or their Airbnbs or even their hotels to ensure that those travelling in from interstate on what would be a terrible journey to identify a loved one or to reconnect with family members who've been injured would have a place to stay, a loving place to stay, I think is an example of the people that you're dealing with here in the Hunter Valley, and also an example of how big-hearted and generous Australians are. Look, a couple of things. Firstly, anyone who's coming to New South Wales because they've lost a loved one will be accommodated, and I understand that police with victim support officers have already started that communication to ensure that if you do travel to Singleton or Cessnock, you've got a place to stay. If that hasn't happened or isn't happening, then of course I want to know about it and we'll fix it straight away. But the response from the New South Wales Police has been amazing. The communication has been quick. It's been fast-tracked, and the identification and communication with families has been done in the shortest period of time possible. So that's in relation to immediate help and support. Obviously, we'll see what and how much is collected via donations, and that will be distributed via Rotary in conjunction with the New South Wales Government.
Can you clarify on seatbelts? Do you want bus drivers to be responsible for their passengers wearing seatbelts in the same way that car drivers are?
Look, it's very important that whatever comment I make about this is not inferred to be about this particular case. That's in front of the courts. That will need to be determined in court. But I would say that it is the law of the land to wear a seatbelt in New South Wales if it's on a bus or a coach. It's the bus driver's responsibility to let people know if there's a seatbelt on that bus, and it's your responsibility to wear it if you're on that bus.
Does it need to be a bigger financial penalty for not wearing a seatbelt?
I just don't want to comment about that. I want the police to have the time and space to conduct their inquiries, to issue a full report to the New South Wales Government, but I will obviously say that if changes are required, then we'll make those changes.
Premier, there has been calls for airline black box style recorders to be fitted into buses. Does the government have a view on that moving forward?
No, not as yet. I mean, that will be both the subject of the inquiry by police and the coroner eventually, and we look forward to receiving their report and we'll take action from there.
Are there any safety measures in place at the crash scene to protect people from not putting triggers?
Perhaps Tracy might be best placed to answer that one. Thanks.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Are there any safety measures in place at the crash scene to protect people who might be putting triggers there?
There are certainly. So there's a reduced speed limit in that area at the moment, and will continue for as long as needed. There is a section that has been left aside in order for people to lay tributes. They can access that through a safe pedestrian passage. The road itself is marked out with some witches' hats, but there's also barriers being put up to ensure that pedestrians are kept safe from any traffic.
And for the Mayor, just on that, how important is it that the local community has a space like this where they can reflect and have a chance to lay tribute?
Yeah, look, the space isn't in Single and LGA. It's obviously in Cessnock where the crash occurred. There will be people that want to actually take that time to actually visit that site when they're ready, and that might be tomorrow, might be next week, might be several months away. But I'm sure some of them will visit the site when they're ready to.
So we saw the roosters.
Are there any plans for a community vigil?
I've been asked about that as well, and been talking with Jay and also the Premier's office as to how that might look and whether we can, how that could be presented to the community and put on.
So do you or Jay have
last night in a vigil together out of the ground? Tell us how much must they be hurting right now, but also how it makes you feel as the Mayor to see them all rallying around each other?
Yeah, that's expected. That's what Singleton does, and Single as a whole just wants to put our arms around them and care for them. But we also appreciate that they want their time with just their own group and respect that opportunity of what they need to do. and very mindful of respecting what they need as a group and as a club.
Sue and Jay, are the councils involved in the vigil that's been advertised online for tomorrow at 5:30 near the crash site?
Well, it's not a council organised event. It's something that I have personally been invited to and spoken to one of the coordinators of.
There doesn't seem to be any official links to any organisation with how it's been advertised. It's very generic.
No, this is solely a member of the community that has spoken to a number of other members of the community that wants to come together and show their respects for the victims involved and pay also tribute to the amazing work of our emergency services as well.
I suppose you wouldn't be surprised by that outpouring, the community wanting to express their thoughts?
No, our community has been shocked by this event, but we do come together and is really wanting to show our support however we can.
So do you and Sue want to work with the Premier on having an official vigil that I suppose is in a space that can probably accommodate it better as well?
Look, I think it's important that we do work together on this, and also we've got to be mindful of the victims' families involved as well, and respectful of what they want. So it's quite important to make sure we go through correct processes.
Yeah, I can speak to that too. I mean, look, there is obviously a need for the community to come together with a public vigil, but I think people would understand in the immediate aftermath of this terrible accident, we need to ensure that the families are respected, they've got time to grieve and get their personal affairs in order before the community comes together. But I'll be working with both mayors to ensure that there is a time and a place for the community to express their grief and lean on one another in the coming weeks.
Tracy, I'd like to just ask you a question. You quite rightfully gave praise to your officers and the wider first responders community. How are your officers doing?
So from New South Wales Police perspective, we have a number of different avenues and pathways that police can access support. In first and foremost, officers have been offered a debrief, and most of whom have taken up that offer. But as I said, with the different pathways, people will feel the impact of this in different ways and at different times. So what's important for us is to make sure that our officers can access what they need when they need it, and they know where to get that support. And so that's our focus at the moment. But the police themselves were very professional and have done a great job. And I'm confident that we will put what support is required around them so that they get what is needed. But I also put out there the impact that it has on police officers' families and other first responders. So we have a family support program as well, and so lots of avenues for police. The support that they get from their loved ones to come to work and do their job every day is really important, and so we make sure we've got that support as well.
Is there a corner of New South Wales Police that hasn't been involved in this response?
This response has certainly been significant for us. Hunter Valley Police District themselves had the bulk of officers involved on the night, but we were certainly aided by Port Stephens Hunter Police, and then all the specialist resources that came in the next day. We have Crash Investigation Unit, Forensic Services, we have Rescue Squad, we've had detectives come into the team from varying police districts around Northern Region. Family support officers or family liaison officers have come from Traffic and Highway Patrol, as well as some commands in Sydney metropolitan areas. And then we of course had a significant response from Traffic and Highway Patrol on the night. So realistically, such a wide range of police resources required during this process, and they'll all get that support. I must also mention, because I did forget, I'm sorry, Police Assistance Line and our communications group, who really came together and helped the police at Cessnock and our unsworn officers at Cessnock, who were taking calls on the first day from members of the family to make sure that we had that direct connectivity right up front. So really across the board, an entire organisation got behind this.
And following on from that, Premier, here we have staff from New South Wales Health, for instance, inside that are providing that face-to-face support for the local community. Do you expect further coordination from across your government over time with whatever agencies or services that the locals need here?
We do. We'll be in talks with New South Wales Police and the local councils about what that support looks like in the coming weeks. We want to make sure that we're available there for families and members of the community, particularly when you've got such a major accident and tragedy that's happened in a community. We want to make sure that we've got boots on the ground. That's what we've got in both Singleton and in the Cessnock local government area, and that will continue until the community says that it's not required anymore.
Will you be, after this, will you be meeting with any of the survivors of the accident or first responders?
Yeah, we'll have a series of meetings after this media conference with the local community and civic leaders to let them know the New South Wales government's there and that the people of this state are behind them. And I want to say, particularly for Dave Lazell and Clayton Barr, the three of us from State Parliament will be here to help the local community, and no doubt we will reflect what the community is saying when Parliament resumes next week.
Can I just ask something on something else?
Sure.
In terms of the toll review, what are your thoughts on a congestion tax or distance-based tolling?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously it's a million miles from what we're up here to talk about today, but I think the Minister for Roads is going to make it clear we don't support those initiatives. We don't support congestion charging in Sydney or distance-based tolling. We've got to have a fair system in operation in Sydney, and that wouldn't be fair.
This is another non-bus related question, but the head of the NRRC said 500 homes that should get buybacks will miss out due to lack of funding. Will you commit more funding for this program in the Northern Rivers?
Well, look, we're in consultation with the Commonwealth Government about ensuring that there's funding available for resettlement in the Northern Rivers. I've had long conversations with local members of Parliament up there. That will continue, but we don't have an announcement about the next stages of the offers that have gone out the door. I do know that in the last 30 days there's been a series of transactions between local property holders in the Northern Rivers on particularly acute flood-prone land, and they've accepted the state government's offer. So that process is continuing. Generally speaking, over the last 12 months, it's been a state Commonwealth jointly funded proposal, and we're in talks with the Commonwealth about the next stages.
Have any safety improvements been identified in relation to the roundabout where the crash happened?
Not as yet, no, not that have been communicated to me. We want to make sure the police have got the time to do their inquiries and their investigations, and obviously, as the matters before the court, I don't want to offer a running commentary about it. Thanks, everybody.